All new episodes of Game Graveyard. Weekdays on RatedEm.
Friday the 13th is one of the most well-known horror franchises out there. Jason has had plenty of films, comic books, and even a few video games to his name. In 2017, fans were treated to a multiplayer Friday the 13th game, featuring many references to the films for Jason fanatics to enjoy. And as the game went on, more content was added for players to experience. But in 2024, the developers announced the game would be shutting down, and furthermore, when fans tried to resurrect the game through modding, their efforts were cut short by a cease and desist. But why? What caused the game to get shut down in the first place? In other words, so what happened to the Friday the 13th game? Let's first start by taking a look at what the game was actually about, as well as exploring its history leading up to its shutdown. Friday the 13th, the game, was, as you could tell by the title, a video game centered around the Friday the 13th franchise. It was an asymmetrical horror game where one player would control Jason Voorhees, tasked with killing all the other players who assumed the roles of the various camp counselors. The camp counselors would have to work together to find various ways to escape before Jason could eliminate them. Initially, the game wasn't a Friday the 13th game, but a generic slasher film themed game called Slasher Volume 1 Summer Camp. It was intended to be a love letter to the Friday the 13th series without directly being an adaptation. However, during this phase of development, the developers IllFonic tried their hardest to secure the actual Friday the 13th license. Luckily, their efforts were successful, and the original film's director, Sean S. Cunningham, granted the team the license. After that, 2 crowdfunding campaigns started up to help fund the game's development. Hype from fans was prevalent as they helped fund a total $1.2 million for the game. IllFonic also managed to cast Kane Hodder, an actor from various Friday the 13th movies, as the motion capture actor for Jason. Alongside Hodder was Tom Matthews reprising his role as Tommy Jarvis for the game. The game would be released on May 26, 2017 as a digital-only release. Unfortunately, it was met with mediocre reviews. Many outlets gave it a middle-of-the-road score, saying the gameplay was unique, but various glitches and lack of content bogged the experience down. Fans did appreciate the references included in the game to various Friday the 13th films, as well as Easter eggs and collectible audio logs that added on to the film series' canon. Over the course of the game's lifespan, more content referencing Friday the 13th media would be added, alongside additional playable content, most notably a single-player mode. However, as time went on, the game's player base would dwindle down to only its most die-hard fans until January of 2025, where the game would be shut down. But why? What caused the game to become inaccessible?
Need a new form of entertainment in your life? Join the thousands of others who have considered subscribing. Side effects may include joy, laughter, and newfound knowledge about video games. Talk to your doctor about if subscribing is right for you.
Want to support the channel? Be sure to share this video with your friends. RatedEm episodes are made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Many factors were at play when it came to the shutdown of Friday the 13th. The biggest one is that the license that the devs worked so hard to attain would expire. The game's servers would shut down because of this in 2020, but online play was still accessible through peer-to-peer connections. In 2023, the game was fully delisted from online stores. If you didn't own the game prior to that, it was no longer accessible to buy outside of a physical copy or a key site. Finally, on January 1st, 2025, all online services for the game would be put to rest, leaving only the single-player content available. But why didn't the devs just renew the license? There's no definitive answer, but my guess is that it was just too expensive to renew. It was also 7 years after the game had been released, so renewing the license would be a massive payment just to appeal to a handful of diehard fans. It could have also been due to another asymmetrical horror-themed multiplayer getting popular and overshadowing Friday the 13th. Of course, I'm talking about Dead by Daylight, which released around the same time as Friday the 13th, but grew in popularity over its lifespan. It's largely the reason why the game's original player base had left. A fan-made mod was announced prior to the complete shutdown in 2024 called Friday the 13th Resurrected, which aimed to restore the game's server functions through private servers, as well as add entirely new content to the game. However, this project did not get very far, as a week before its release, a cease and desist was sent to the modding team on the basis of copyright infringement. Since then, we've seen a few horror movie-themed video games that follow a similar formula to Friday the 13th. I want to say most notable is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game, but still, to this day, Dead by Daylight reigns supreme.